In this chapter, we hear that it's not always about the latest marketing trends. Jen Neal at Esquire tells us that really it's about being able to utilize all of the platforms strategically. Each area is an opportunity. And I couldn't agree more with Jen. If you know your audience, and you know your audience segments, then you know what platforms they're going to use, and you're going to know what type of message they want to see, how they want to see it, and when they want to see it. In this chapter, we hear that scheduling is no longer just one event anymore. With the entire ecosystem changed, marketeers are now faced with the challenge of where and when the audience is viewing the show. Angela Cortin from Fox tells us how critical it is to understand where the audience is so that you can be there too. It's about finding them and communicating the right content to them.
Talk about playing with tools like Snapchat. I mean, how important is it to jump on the bandwagon? Do you use the new tool or is it about what audience you're going for?
It's like anything else. Every show is a unique sort of entity, and all of these were examples of audiences telling you what they want, even telling you how they want you to communicate with them. If it's appropriate for Snapchat for one show, it might not be for another. And then you rely on Facebook or Twitter or Tumblr or whatever else might be appropriate.
I think that all of the social entities are worth exploring and looking at. We use a multitude of them for different shows. It's really about finding out where your audience is going and what they're expecting in terms of the messaging in that environment in each of the different areas of opportunity. So it's about using them, but using them strategically for different reasons with different messages and creative. But that's where a lot of audiences are, and I think it goes back to if your audience is there and that's how they're getting their pop culture and their social currency, you go there and you figure out where they are first.
Are you ever presented with a show and then you're utterly perplexed by, I don't know how I'm going to market this, and how have you gotten past that?
One of the best parts of working on a marketing strategy is sitting with research and understanding there is an audience for every show, and what do those audiences love about this show, and beginning with that. And whether it's a horror show like Exorcist on Fox, how are you reinventing a Friday night for horror fans, and knowing that if you succeed with horror fans, you have done your job. And you can find them and you can understand what's going to resonate. And if you stick with that, you can do your job really well. And it's when you have to broaden out of that, how do you then think about converting non-horror fans who watch TV on Friday night, who might be women over 25, who are single looking for something to do? Let's find out what they love about watching TV on a Friday night. What do they need? So it really begins with those, who is the audience and what is the insight, and how can you make that actionable?
How important is scheduling? Do you sit down with the scheduler and to the point about Friday nights and figure out what that timing matters?
Scheduling is vital, and it's changing. I mean, it's no longer about driving audience necessarily to Sunday night. We're about to scatter our schedule, and largely that's driven by, again, audience patterns, viewership patterns, what we see in streaming, what we see in non-linear viewing. We're looking for more premier events during the course of the year, and that's going to help us with branding. It's going to help us with awareness. It's going to help enhance the halo of Showtime. Homeland burnished to the benefit of Ray Donovan. Ray Donovan did the same thing for The Affair. Back-to-back Sunday nights have their value, but we're looking at it in a different way.
How are you scheduling like the televisual linear versus your digital and social platforms? How are you thinking about your windowing in VOD, your non-owned platforms? So this whole world, it's a whole completely different ecosystem. And I think our job as marketers is to figure out where our audiences watching the show, because it's not the same audience in any of those areas and ways. So for us, it's about figuring out that whole ecosystem and how it works, and working in lockstep with the people in our organizations that know that, but also if you put yourself in the mindset of what the consumer or viewer is watching, where are they watching it, how are they finding out about the show, and it makes our jobs even more exciting and complex in terms of figuring out how to message to make that work.
We've even premiered shows against Super Bowl, against Grammys, against Academy Awards, and for this audience, sometimes it doesn't matter. You can find your audience nonetheless.
A show will go in a square, and a scheduler makes that call with a lot of different information and inputs to that. But I think your point is absolutely right. It's that then the marketing team will begin to schedule every asset to link into that show. And it may not be about, our first and primary job is always driving to, the live view, but there's also a whole other community. You look at some of these shows that do 100% or 200% over live, and you think, okay, so how do we find those? Because they're equally as valuable, especially now that we've moved into a C7 window. That becomes a valuable viewer. And it's scheduling all those assets across all those channels. And every one of those distribution points is a channel for marketing to reach them and thinking about how to convert them.
I do think that it also is, you alluded to, a really sort of critical question, which is the desire to launch something off the back of another big successful show, and so therefore to sort of stack what you have and keep it together, versus continuing, sort of keeping a continual year-round presence, and particularly so that there's something exciting happening within the brand, that's, and particularly for subscription, television, where we're going to be driving viewership, and it's not just all in one place. And so, and I also think there's so many things. Look, you schedule, or at least right now on Sunday nights, we schedule on Sunday nights. There's football for a lot of the year on Sunday night, which is the biggest, thing that's on television, honestly. I think it's about putting something out at a time when you can make enough noise for it, get attention, perhaps hopefully generate some of that word of mouth that's so critical for some of these shows that people discover, if not on its first night, a little bit later in its run. So I think there's a lot of factors, and we're having to balance all of them depending on what the show is and who the audience is.
Angela, as you're heading into broadcast fall preview up front, I mean, how are you finding a space for all the shows and making a place to launch everything?
I think that we have to look at each show and find those moments over summer to really pop. Every one of my colleagues across the nets are trying to do the same thing. So it's finding, again, starting with the audience. And I know we're all underscoring that, but it's really critical to understand where they are so that you can be there too. Son of Zorn is very different than Lethal Weapon. So Comic-Con may make more sense to find an animation fan. So really looking at the cultural calendar and finding those moments where we can authentically link to that and find audiences who are going to be there. And then, again, figuring out, when you look at that schedule, how do you make sure that you're putting out content that's not drowning out other content selling your shows? We have 4 new launches, this fall. So there's a lot of overlap, thankfully, but there's also a lot of uniqueness, which is great because you can literally go, thanks to data and partners like those guys at the end, you can find them and actually communicate with them in a one-on-one, conversation that's putting the right content that they want to, it's a family show, it's an animation show, it's a show about a guy who's a fish out of water. Those are all great themes, and you can find ways to communicate those with great creative. As Pam said, it's really about that.